and it changed her insides internally, and she became a different person. And it was amazing to see the transformation. And now at recess, Jessica's playing, and she's doing double dutch. I'm not asking you to do double dutch, Laura. I'm not going to do that. But she's like, I've done it before. But here's the thing. When we got a chance to know who Jessica was and we connected with Jessica, Jessica connected with us. And all of a sudden, the same broken child, the same broken little girl became somebody of significance. And it was amazing. Can we give Jessica a round of applause? Thank you. So, here's the thing. I believe that things are great. I believe in the impossible. I believe, Noah, that you are probably a phenomenal man. I believe that you are a phenomenal teacher. I believe that you have a higher sense of purpose and you are here for a higher calling. And I believe if we truly got to know this man and understood his heart and understood who he was, then we would have a higher appreciation for who he is. How many people would agree? Anybody at this table know this man right here? Okay? What do you know about this man?
He's very, very caring.
Very, very caring. What else do you know about this man? Passionate. Caring. Passionate. What else? What is it? Positive. Caring. Passionate. Positive. What else? Determined. What else? Organized. Now Noah's turning red over here. He's like, oh my God, please stop it. He's like, really, internally he's like, bring it on, baby. I get it. I understand. Now here's the thing. All of a sudden, have we ever met?
No, sir.
Is this staged? Have I ever met with you in my life? Have we ever talked prior to this?
No, sir.
Now, in a matter of a few seconds, what happened to Noah? What happened? All of a sudden, when we praised him and began to get to know him, now all of you know more about Noah than you ever knew because you never knew him. But once we got to know him through the people who know him, to find out that he is a good man, to find out that he is a man of significance, that he is here for a greater sense of purpose, all of a sudden, what does that make us feel about Noah? Make us feel special, right? Make us feel inclusive. Now it makes us want to encourage Noah to do what? To continue doing the job that he's doing. Noah, how do you feel?
Good.
He feels good. As a matter of fact, he feels great because he can't stop smiling, all right? So here's a man that we never knew. Here's a man, we don't know his past, but we know enough about this man to realize that he is a decent human being. Freeze frame. Every child that comes into our room, in order for us to connect with that child, we got to get to know him. You know, when Dr. Coates talked about there are principals in the schools that kids don't even know the principal's name, that is a travesty. But see, when we get to know someone, when we get to interact with someone, when we build a relationship with someone, then all of a sudden we begin to have breakthroughs that we've never had before. And when we really get to know who this man is or who that child is, we begin to build a sense of trust. And when we build a sense of trust, then anything is possible. Because if you trust someone, will you follow them? Absolutely. If you trust someone, will you believe in them? Yes. If you trust someone, can you build a positive relationship despite the situation they're going through because there's a trust factor? See, many of the teachers in my life, especially the ones who they said I had problems with, there were certain teachers who did not like me because my job when I was coming up in school was to cause ulcers. That's what I did. I wanted to make sure that I could wreak havoc on any teacher because I was disconnected. But there were certain teachers, Tony, who when I came into their classroom and other teachers were congregating said, oh my God, here comes Mark Anthony. Because how many of you have had students where you really love what you do, but then all of a sudden there are certain times when you hear a certain student's name, and of course you're trying to be positive like Noah, right? And Noah, you're a positive guy. But there are certain kids that you hear their name and you're like, oh my God, okay. Oh my goodness. Woo! Yeah, I'll take them. Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely. And I mean, let's just be real. Your gut just turns over because you know that it's going to be some work. How many people would agree? Absolutely. You hear a certain kid's name, they're coming, and you're like, oh, you couldn't have stayed home today? We really don't want to say that, but we're thinking it. I'm just being real. Absolutely. And we ask ourselves, can those kids be reached? But there are certain children, the ones who we think cannot be reached through trust, relationships, understanding. We begin to build bridges with those children. Now all of a sudden those children become children of greatness. See, for Miss Ritchie, it was incredible because I never thought that I could be anything great. Because she told me, Mark, you're going to grow up and you're going to be significant. You're going to be important. You're going to be somebody of purpose. And see, when we begin to understand that and how we interact with children, we begin to build the relationships and we begin to understand that we can build a sense of community. We can reconnect with why we became educators. And that is the greatest thing. When we reconnect with this, we begin to become excited again. Because how many of you guys remember when you first started? By a show of hands. Absolutely. You guys were excited. You couldn't wait. You were excited. You couldn't wait. You got your lessons planned together. You got your room together. You were bouncing around like Tigger from Winnie the Pooh. And you guys were bouncing around. You were excited about it. And you couldn't wait. You're like, oh my God, I can't wait. It's so excited. The kids are coming. And you were just one of those sunshine people, right? And you couldn't wait for the kids to come. Kids were coming in. How you doing? Good. Oh, how are you? How are you, young man? Tie your shoe. All the stuff, right? And you were excited. And so the first few days, it was great. You loved it. And then a couple weeks go by, and a couple years go by, and 2 years turns into 5. And then all of a sudden, you wake up in the morning, and you're like, oh, God, go on to make the donuts. You know, and then some of you guys, and no, I don't know if you have been one of those guys. Maybe it was Angela, okay? Angela, have you ever thought about quitting at least once?
No, I just started.
Okay, she just, foot in my mouth. Angela said, no, I just started today. No, I'm just joking. Who in here has thought about quitting at least once? Okay, right here, what is your name? Carrie? Okay, Carrie, pressures of the job, just thought about quitting, right? So can I do a scenario maybe about how you were thinking at that particular time? Carrie, I'm going to be Carrie for a minute, all right? So Carrie decides, she says, you know what? I am tired of these kids. I'm tired of all these kids. You know, I'm done. It's over. And Carrie decides she's going to quit. She's going to turn in her resignation. She's going to go to her superintendent, to her principal, and Carrie, you're out of the game. You're done. It's over. And Carrie, she writes her letter, Tony. She writes her letter, Laura. And all of a sudden, she has the letter written, and she's about to turn it in. And then all of a sudden, she realizes something very important. She realizes that she has a mortgage, so she can't quit. So all of a sudden, she has this mortgage, and she's like, I've got to stay in the game. But then all of a sudden, she remembers why she became a teacher, why she became an educator. And the love and the compassion of that connection, of connecting back with what we do, becomes relevant in our lives again. So the thing about it is, when we look at this, we understand that we're facing a lot of different things. So we look at what are some problems teachers are facing. Well, first of all, a lot of teachers have not established what their purpose is. So the issues of purpose, feeling important, poverty. How many kids do we face that come to school that haven't even eaten the night before? Or maybe haven't even went to bed the night before, or maybe have just suffered so much poverty that we want to reach out and we want to help, but we can't. What about the pedagogical trained teacher? Now we're dealing with kids of color, kids of different cultures, and we're trying to figure out, how do we do this thing? How do we do this to effectively communicate with these kids? So now it's a cultural thing. Then we look at safety, respect, burnout, standardized testing, and the list goes on and on. So the biggest problem that we face are a lot of different things, but the greater sense of purpose is understanding, is it possible, despite all these problems, that we can still move forward? You know, it was amazing as I was looking at Dr. Your superintendent and the guy who founded this. You know, when you look at Dr. Coates and his message, I looked at that and I looked at all the adversity that he's probably had to go through in creating this group. All the things he's faced as an educator, but yet here's a guy who's still optimistic after all these years. How does that happen? It's a learned condition. It's a programming to say that no matter what I'm facing, that the greater sense of purpose of why I'm here is why I do what it is I do. And see, that third grade year was a turning point. And that turning point in that third grade year was the year in which I decided that probably I was going to succeed, but then I come home from school and my father's home early from work, and that's an unusual thing. And my father, you know, he's a hardcore guy, ex-Marine. My father was not a guy who would have watched Lifetime. My father was not someone who would tell you that he loved you. My father never told me he loved me until I was 34 years old. He just wasn't that guy. But I come home from school and my father's home early from work, unusual thing. And I look at my father, my mother had been crying, so I'm thinking maybe they had been fighting, but what I didn't realize is that after 36 years of service at this factory job with a 11th grade education, my father was let go. It's 1977. Downsizing started many, many years ago. My father had nowhere else to go. 1977, downsize is over. And I remember my father just looking at that paper, and I never saw my father cry, and I saw him become very emotional. And he went back into the room and he slammed the door and he stayed there for hours. And all of a sudden, my father, who was the primary breadwinner, is now being downsized from his job with nowhere to go with an 11th grade education. What's he going to do? Where's he going to go? So we're being evicted from our home because we don't have the money to pay the rent. And I remember going to school and I was devastated, and I looked at Miss Ritchie and I told her what was going on, and I remember I cried because I knew that my lifeline, my champion, my hero, I was going to be ripped away from her. Well, you know, the thing about it was she told me the day that I left, she said, one day you will be significant. Never forget what we learned here. Never forget that what we learn in our kingdom, never forget that you are significant. See, sometimes it's not the amount of time that we spend with our students, it is the quality. Because they're never going to remember the big things we do. It's always going to be the small things. It's the hugs. And they say, you can't hug your kids. Listen, hug your kids. If you love your kids, if you love what you do, hug your kids. As long as it's nothing inappropriate, hug your kids. Hug those babies. They need it. Sometimes your hug would be the only hug they get for a week, maybe for a year. Hug your kids. Let them know that you care. Let them know that you love them. Look them in the eye and tell them how important they are because they need it. Sometimes that's the only thing that gets those kids through the day is your love and your compassion for them. Love your children. Tell them how important they are. Tell them how valuable they are, because let me share this with you. As much as your children need you, I think you need them too. Because many of our lives have been changed by what it is that we do. Many of our lives have been changed by the children that we interacted with. Just like me and Miss Ritchie, we had a connection. It was a mental connection. It was a spiritual connection. Because I love this woman. She was my hero.